this is like after the age of Rush Limbaugh. And so I go with my wife at the time to visit for Christmas. And my parents are very um, uh, conservative, and you don't ever use profanity around them. It just like it would just be the most shockingly disturbing thing to do. And so then they're shared. My mother's like saying the N word, and it's clear like this is something she heard from Rush Limbaugh. Like, oh, it's just a word. It's just a word. And it's like, yeah, I'm just so disgusted. And I said, fuck, fuck, fuck. At the dinner. No, it wasn't Christmas dinner, but I just yelled it out. And it was like silent. And I'm like, what? It's just a word, right? It's just a word. And I'm sure Lynn was surprised too, because I almost never used profanity ever. And it was just like, I just like shouted out, fuck, fuck, fuck. And like, just look at me. And this is like, I'm visiting them. But I was just so outraged by that stupidity of just saying it's just a word. Like, okay, then here's just another word for you.
Racism is full of stupidity. Oh my God, chock full of it. And so, yeah, that is definitely a really good anecdote to illustrate it. And man, the ball's on you, sir. Oh my goodness. That is incredible. What a great story. And see,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I
listen,
thought it
but
was
think about, wait, Bruce, think about this, bro. Think about your past self in that moment.
yes,
Think
exactly,
about your
exactly.
present self now at work.
Yeah. But I couldn't do that. Like when your supervisor, you're new on the job, you're shadowing someone, and I'm supposed to learn from this person. And I just like, oh, he's like, I'm not gonna make you work tonight. Like, oh, thank God. And so, and then like I ended up, the job didn't even work out. And I'm like, what the heck did I do wrong? I'm thinking, was it what I said about to this person? Like I started talking about like, has anything changed in Burlington over the years and stuff like that? And was he saying something bad about me? It turned out it was something else. But like I started getting paranoid. Like, did I lose my job because of that? But luckily I got another job at a place that was now where I'm working now. That's not as a on mobile crisis right now. Well, no, I used to be a mobile crisis, but I work at Freedom House Recovery Center on the crisis unit now.
Well, I'm glad that worked out, but like just to go to your point, like yeah, maybe that is the reason why. But like I guess I'm kind of
Yeah,
yeah, like I mean it totally could be, right? But like I guess like
yeah,
one thing I want to highlight from that is that that's why it's so difficult for a lot of people to walk down a path of anti-racism, which I would
yeah,
characterize that decision that you would have to make in that situation with your supervisor as an act of anti-racism. And so like the reason why that's so difficult is
yeah,
because it it is a sacrifice within an environment that accepts racism, and that's the environment in which we live.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, it puts people to a choice of, you basically got to hurt yourself in order to stand up to racism. And it's not like racism is alone in that regard. There's a lot of things like that, right? Like if you want to get
yeah,
stronger at the gym, you got to rip your muscles. If you want to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but a lot of people don't choose to go through this process in the race context because they don't
right,
have to.
right. Yeah, because you're not always empowered to do that. Yeah,
Well, it's not. It's actually you are always empowered to do that. It's just
yeah, yeah. It
it,
is.
it's not always. Um, it sometimes feels like you're between a rock and a hard place. The way that you felt growing up, right? Like the way that you always felt like you couldn't speak out, right? You said you felt like it was suffocating, and
Right,
so
exactly.
yeah,
But then it would be like the work I would be doing for people in the area would be helping them. So to speak up early and sacrifice my job would affect the target population that we serve. So yeah, that's why I felt like, well, what do I do? Like, I really want to help people, and
I think you gotta think of it this way, right? So you're thinking about the downstream consequences of you not being there, but what about the
right,
downstream consequences of that person staying there, right? So
yeah,
like,
good point.
yeah. So I mean, instead of thinking of it like a measuring,
Yeah,
like a kind of measuring, I think that that's impossible, right? And I
right,
know it's like people's inclination to want to try to measure racism and try to measure the consequences of racism and stuff like that, but I think
right,
that it's not a very fruitful endeavor because it's I do think it's possible, but like not in the way that anyone tries to do it. I
yeah,
so I think that
well,
it's instead what we should do is focus on like who do we want to be? How do we want to show up as the person who is Bruce, who is Will, who is whoever, right?
right,
How
yeah,
do we want to show up
yeah,
in a toxic racial environment facing racism before us? You have to that is a question that one can answer definitively, I believe. Like as like what do you want to do? It's basically will you speak up in these moments or will you not? And it doesn't have to be an absolute, okay? Like some moments you may choose to speak up, other moments you may choose not to speak up. But you should
yeah,
have some kind of a value about
right,
it. And that kind of value, I feel, is something that we don't even allow people to even consider developing. And that is
right,
part
yeah,
of the reason why I have these conversations is to get people to think about anti-racism as a value because ultimately I believe it should be part of our national American values is
right, yeah,
anti-racism given the history of the country.
right. So let me ask you then this question though. When I first started off in the social work field, I had a chance to work at Duke and Sampson County Mental Health. It was a rural area, um, and I had a great experience working with a lot of diverse clients who really loved to meet with me, and I had more opportunities to actually provide therapy to Black uh, clients. But also there was this attitude there of in the mental health field, the psychiatrists were like in control, and I lost confidence in the control structure and their ability to empower us to empower the clients. And so, like at one point, I saw a client that was trying to say he's having bad side effects from medication. And I'd already heard psychiatrists say things like in staff meetings, I work with chronic crazies all day, and which was just so disgusting. Um, but so there I am, and during the meeting with us, I accompanied the psychiatrist with the client, and he's not even listening to the client about his side effects because that's my idea is that they're not really paying attention. So I have to just go to this client on my own and tell them, like, you can sign something, put in writing that you refuse to take this medication. Among other things that cost me that job was doing that, like not being part of the team. And so then I get a job where I do have enough credits at that point to go into private practice. But unfortunately, people who were Black were not choosing in Wilmington. I didn't have the opportunity to work with as many. It wasn't, I don't know, it's part of the racism is that there is income disparity. But even though I was doing like a few pro bono cases, um, it, if I was there longer, I would have wanted to have opportunities. Some bad things happen, but so if I stayed in my career, I would have probably tried to find opportunities to market to a more diverse population. Um, but like, so that was what was going through my mind, not to just get fired from a company on an impulse and not then be able to help people who really wanted to meet with me. Like I worked with um, one person, she was a young Black girl who had schizophrenia, and they were discouraging psychotherapy for people with that. So, oh, just give them medications and let them go. But I was empowered to actually provide therapy if she asked for it and she wanted to meet with me. And so, like, okay, cool. Like, well, I'll just add it, and then I'll tell the caseworkers to bring you here. So that's the trade-off that you have at some point. Like, I don't, I don't, I didn't want to be in that position where I get fired. Like, then you're not helping people. Just, I don't know. Like, how do you balance those values?
I
Or
think that
like,
I think that what you're not really talking about values, right? What you're talking about is consequences, right?
yeah,
You're talking
okay,
about the consequences. So
yeah,
your values come before the consequences, right? Your
right,
values are implicated first. So that's
right,
why it's important to decide on a value first, because it makes the consequences irrelevant. You've already thought about them. You've already
right,
considered them and made a decision. So when the
right,
situation arises, you're ready to make your decision already. And so ultimately, in terms of what you said, what I think is that um, I don't think it was a done deal that you would get fired if you spoke up. I
yeah.
think
Yeah, it
that
was
that
that actually the reason. But it did feel painful. It felt sickening. And um, I, I guess eventually I would have tried to speak up, but it was still a toxic experience that was like, I didn't want to ever like, that was the only day I was going to have to work with that particular individual. Um, so yeah, I could have gone to my supervisor and say, you know, if I, there was another reason why I lost the job that I don't want to discuss here, but yeah, I had that value. I could have gone to my supervisor and said, you know, that people need to be able to trust that we're going to treat everyone equally, and this employee is racist. And
yeah, but see, even that, right? Like, okay, so like there's a lot of different things that play in these scenarios, right? Which is like, how do you approach people about a situation like that, right? What do you say? Like, if you approach them and you said that, that could go badly for you. But if you approach them and you said, you know, one of my values as a mental health professional
right,
is to make sure that I can build trust, and trust comes through the environment. And if we have someone in our environment who is saying racist things, then they are consistently and permanently breaking trust as they are working
right,
in our environment. And I was like, that's a big concern of mine. And I wanted to bring it to you and see what you think and just put it back on them. Put it back on
yeah,
them to say what they're going to do about it, because that's their job. But you've brought the issue to the table, and that was as much as you could do, right? So,
right,
like,
yeah, yeah, that's true.
so part of it
Um,
is like realizing what the limits of what you can do are, right? And if you show that
right,
you know what those limits are in doing it, people will respect that because it gives them an out as well. If they don't
yeah,
want to do anything about it, they will feel
right.
comfortable shutting you down and having that be the end of it instead of taking further action against you.
I was asking the question because when I pitched an idea, it was like I wanted to talk to someone about something that was a very clear, articulated um, refutation of a lot of racist ideas. And it was actually liberating to hear it coming from a white guy. And so I was curious, like, and uncomfortable, I guess, when you said, well, what's my point? What am I trying to accomplish? I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, Yeah, I was just like confused.
Well, I
Oh,
mean, I guess I asked you that because you kind of contradicted yourself when you were telling me about what you wanted to do. And so, like, I was kind of like, I was trying, the reason I asked that question, I was like, this will settle that conflict, you know? But the fact that you couldn't really answer to me shows that, like, maybe you did it out of sequence, you know? Again, it's kind of like the value thing first versus the consequences thing. Like, it's very similar. Like, I think that people should first think about the things that they actually have control over, their own families, their own friends, their own coworkers, like their
right,
own leisure and whatever they choose to do with their time,
right,
right? I think that's where you always have to start, right? That's where everything starts. That's where
right,
anyone who's ever accomplished something that they set to started, it started with them. And so I think that so many people are always looking outside of themselves to get their start with this anti-racism stuff. But the truth of the matter is, like, we all have internal work to do, first of
right,
all, and then second of all, like, then we all have our local communities in which we can also act, you know.
right.
what i've
Yeah,
what i've created here is an opportunity for people to communicate, like, just virtually, right, across, any border. But, like, ultimately I feel like what we need is a lot of this conversation happening simultaneously across the nation, and that's what's going to catalyze change. Right now that conversation is being suppressed legislatively, socially, so, like, politically, like, I mean, so we need brave people who are
right,
willing to make the sacrifice to stand up for what's right and say, listen, we need to talk about this because the country as it exists right now, the racial environment that we've created and cultivated over all these generations, we're not going to stand for it anymore. It's not
right.
necessary. It's not necessary that it exists, and it should not exist. And therefore, I'm going to work towards a world where it doesn't exist. And step one is talking about it. It's just we got to talk about it first. Let me explain one contradiction, okay? There were more than one, but I'm going to give you one just to give you an explanation, just to at least give you something to bite on here, okay? Which is, you talked about interviewing black people about racial trauma. Remember that?
Yeah, so good point. Yeah, so I was thinking from a scientific
Right.
standpoint
No,
that you would,
right. Of course. Yeah. That's what you were talking about. You were talking about, like, gathering data, right? Like gathering information that you would analyze, or like give people to analyze, or like you were like, maybe we could figure something out. Right. And I was like,
right,
right. And I'm like, okay, like that makes perfect sense. Right. But you also acknowledged that you would be kind of forcing people to relive those traumas, that they've gone through. And as you probably can imagine, given you're a racialized white man who felt like an alien among races, what it might feel like for these black people to go back and try to relive what they experience on the wrong side of the racial hierarchy. So, you know, I think that was where the conflict was, right? It wasn't you said you didn't want to necessarily do that, but you also wanted to collect this data. So I was like, basically, like, what are you trying to, like, you need to think about what it
yeah.
is you're trying to do then, because if, you can't even weigh that without having some kind of more specific intention, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah, so I was thinking at the time, I don't know what to talk about. Like, okay, we've got this idea that we've been exposed to about racial trauma. I could ask you, but like, I don't know, what good would that do? Like,
Bro, what are you talking about? Ask me, of course. Why would you ask somebody else but not me? You're right. What in the world?
because that would just give me one person's experience.
That's
So I
well,
guess I
it would
was
be
like,
one person no matter who you ask. But, like, but wait a minute. Wait. Why would you not ask me? That's what we're here for.
okay, so let
What?
me see if I can word it better. This is confusing. So I've already asked some people, and so um, the anecdotal evidence is something I think about a lot. And so I thought to have a meaningful understanding of any kind of idea or theory or psychological term, racial trauma is defined and being considered as a psychological term. So right away, then my mind goes to you don't just want a anecdotal conversation from that. So I absolutely did not mean that anecdotal discussions are not entertaining, but and valuable, but in terms of a psychological phenomena, it just the scientist in me is thinking like, we need, what's that going to come up with? That's going to just tell one person's experience of racial trauma. And like what we were talking about earlier, I'm like dealing with things that I just realized today, like, oh, from someone describing stressors and microaggressions and even direct racism, I've experienced that, even though I'm white, and yet even I've had to be exposed to this as well. And so that is what I meant, I guess, that not to belie your own experiences or to diminish them, but it's like, what would that deliver for me? It certainly wouldn't be the same experience when I've asked my supervisor about this. When we're talking about this from our trainings, we're like, oh, I just do that. I'm American. I don't really think that much about it. Okay,
well, listen, bro. Listen. Instead of imagining what might happen, okay, since I'm right here in front of you, right, and we're right here, why don't you just do whatever you want? Okay, I'm not. You are not obligated to to act in any way. You should do whatever you choose in this time, in this space that we've created for it. If you want to, if you don't want to, if you don't think anecdotes are valuable, then don't get them. But like, what do you want to do? Like, let's figure that out.
As I started pitching the idea, I'm thinking, that's really good. And so
I mean, I don't have to just talk about anecdotes, bro. I've been studying this issue for 3 decades. Like, I have more knowledge than you could ever ask of me ever. But like, you have to like actually like try to like figure something out, or like something. I don't know what you want to do. Like, so you decide. You have the steering wheel. You choose what you want to do, and then I'm here for it.
Okay, so then I could have said, well, here's another reason to put off scheduling this, because I really need to listen to all your videos to know what you already know. So that then
no, brother, listen, brother, assume that if you know it, I know it. Okay? Like, that is a pretty safe assumption in this subject area. Okay? So you don't need to worry about what I do and don't know. What you need to worry about is, what do you want to do? And I'm going to go back to it and keep going back to it, because that's what's going to move the conversation forward. You need to think about what it is that you want to do here and now. I already know what I'm doing. I spelled it out to you very clearly and explicitly, right? So like, this is the space. It's here for you. So it's I mean, I could ask you some questions if you want, but like, if you want to ask me anything, if you want to just go back and forth, whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a very good point. So what would I want to do? I would ask you then, based on what I've discovered in our conversations, then and actually in the last discussion we had about how you said that I could, in therapy sessions, just say, if you want to talk about racialized trauma, I'm not going to get defensive. Like, okay, but I want to be able to ask more people than that, because as I was going through thinking about this discussion tonight, I'm thinking, man, people, if they're actually dealing with the primary issue of racial trauma, they're not going to be thinking, let's go to talk to this white guy. I don't know, like, or would they? Because so for me to actually get a range of or stories that are compelling stories, I would like to find a way to talk to people about this. And as a practical matter, when people don't want to talk about it because it's traumatic, and it is for me too, to think about it. Yeah, and when I see things happening, it's like, oh my God, I can't imagine if that happened to someone I love. That's just terrifying. It is terrifying. Or if it happened to me, like if I got married and my son was black or daughter was black, like that would be so devastating and terrifying. So yeah, it's more complicated than to just say if you'd like to talk about it. I don't know how one can go about gathering those kind of insights from a lot of different people to know a lot of different.
I'm still not really clear about what insights you're looking for after you said all that. I really still am not sure
I
what it
don't know
is.
because
Hey, consequently, what's
what
up?
I'm saying is I could talk to you. You could give me a few insights. I could talk to what my insights are. I could talk to another person. That's just going to be a few insights, experiences, but then the next 10 people might have, who knows, 100 other experiences that would be.
Okay, but why are you so far in your imagination right now? Like when you're right in front of me. Like, bro, I have more knowledge than you would ever be able to get out of me if you started now and ended on your deathbed. Like, but you're instead of actually trying to get it, you're talking about how you can't get it. Like, do you even get the irony here? Like,
Yeah,
like I mean,
I don't think you're understanding. Like,
I don't
my
think
goal is
you're
not
I
to
don't
get.
think you're considering what it is you're doing right now. You're trying to explain something to me, but like,
Yeah,
bro, you the knowledge that you're seeking is like in front of your face, and yet this you're explaining to me how you can't get it. So like, that's what's going on for sure. We're talking about clients with racial trauma. He was asking me about, how do I start opening my practice up to like helping these people who are dealing with racial trauma and giving them, an opportunity to have therapy on that issue. And I was just saying, like the first step is to make people aware that,
right.
they can actually go to you, right? Like, I mean, if you think about the environment that we actually exist in racially, it's very difficult. As a black person, I
Right.
can speak from experience and what I've heard from many other racialized black people, that it's very difficult to figure out who you can trust,
Yeah,
who is racialized white. So the default for a lot of people becomes distrust for racialized white people
right,
because it's safer, much safer.
right. Yeah,
And so ultimately, without doing something affirmative to show that you can be trusted, and then it's not going to work basically. And so like that's why I say start there. It's a dual purpose. Purpose number one, to give you a chance to assert your values, right?
right.
Purpose number two, to give your clients of color an opportunity to develop a bond of trust with you, because that's probably not going to happen otherwise. So,
Right.
yeah.
But one thing that occurred to me, I had this association to hearing someone say that they would never go to a man for counseling or therapy if they were a rape victim. And it made me nostalgic of like the experience of helping women and girls who were rape victims. And I guess at that time, it didn't even occur to me to like the first time not the first time, but one of the times I wrote about it in my memoir. It was in an inpatient setting, And I just went like, oh, I can help you with this. And yeah, so during that session, I helped uh yeah, a black female, but it was with dealing with rape. And in my practice, I had someone come in and say she'd been raped recently. And so it was just, I guess when I hear that idea, like recently someone, I never go to a guy.
Listen,
When
listen,
like,
listen, brother. That's someone's personal, subjective, individual choice, right? And so, like, also, like, I remember sitting at a bar, like, I'm sitting at a
yeah,
bar. There's a stranger I met there. I end up talking to her for like 5 minutes. I realize I have the key to helping her. I could help her quite easily, actually, like, in the, relatively for what she was going through. And
right,
so she recognized that that was possibly true. So that was a rare situation where there was
right,
me who could help her and her with the recognition that that might actually be a possibility. But she didn't want it to be me to help her, like ultimately. And so so that just never materialized. And we went along our merry way and everyone was fine. That you have to be able to accept that
right.
outcome. You should not be trying to dictate
Yeah.
that outcome in any way, shape, or form. And I
So
want to.
you're using
Hey,
cognitive behavioral techniques right now?
what'd you say?
You're using cognitive behavioral techniques right now
Yeah,
to
man, I
point
use a
out.
lot of techniques. I've learned a lot of things. Listen, I want to read some comments to you that people left for you
uh,
because people are also listening to this and thinking about
yeah,
what you're
thank
talking about.
you.
So, we got Jujitsu Music here saying, I recommend Dr. Linda Elder. Linda Elder. Liberating the mind for confronting and overcoming egocentric and sociocentric biases in thinking. It applies to both racialization as well as sex, age, etc. stereotypes, heuristics, and prejudices and dogma. Okay? Nonsequently here says, I would also like to say that as white social workers, we need to be doing the work to center and support BIPOC social workers and making the profession more accessible. I think that's a really good point. Jiu Jitsu Music says Dr. Sheena Mason, Dr. Carlos Hoyt Jr.
Can you put this in the chat or email to me?
Of course, yeah. I can
All
share
right.
these with you. Let me just go ahead and make a note for myself right now.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
just going to write
Cool.
them down so that I can remember. Got my notepad
Yeah, that's
here.
awesome. Thank you. Thanks for the suggestions. Whoever's sharing, I can't see unless I look at the chat. If I didn't have open.
No problem, no problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
Dr. Linda Eller, Dr. Sheena Mason, Carlos White Jr. All right.
Okay.
And consequently also chimed in to say, we aren't really there to help people. We are there to support people, walking
Okay.
alongside them in empowering themselves. Helping from a white social worker is wandering right into white saviorism. So we definitely want to avoid that for sure. But, I think that you mentioned earlier, right, that you understand that your job should be empowering others, right? So
Oh, yeah, yeah. So that's interesting that could have that someone felt the need to say that. Because I really hadn't gone into my approach too much. And it's interesting when I do work with people, more often than not, I do very little talking. And it's only when I'm doing something like experiential, I'll describe it and say, like, do you want to do this? Like if it's hypnosis or some gestalt technique or something where it is experiential, then
So you very much like kind of tailor the therapy based on the client, huh?
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I want to know, what do you want? Um, Now there are a few times, like in that inpatient setting, where you just seem dead and not even alive. So like I, yeah, there was the intern underneath me that was brother to me, and she actually asked the female intern not to be in the session. So like that was cool. Like he didn't want to expose the story of her rape to anyone else. But it was rewarding to be able to help her. Um, so in that way, that was an exception. But normally, I just like start off by listening and asking open-ended questions. So yeah, in these type of groups, I come across as talking a lot, and I guess maybe when I get nervous, I do that. But like when I'm one-on-one with a client, like I totally different. So
Yeah, that
I
makes sense. I mean, that makes perfect sense. But like, I guess all I would say is like, if that's your approach, it makes even more sense to do what I said, because if that's how you approach your conversations with your clients and you lead off with your values
right,
and then you just leave it open for them, you're
uh-huh,
going to, it's like casting a net, right? And you're going to
right,
capture the people who fall into the category of, oh, I do want to talk about this, and wow, what a rare occasion, someone who actually might get it. That's why I keep reiterating what I'm reiterating about stating your values up front, because it's going to make you more effective in your therapy as well. And so like, it's just, I really think what you should do is you should like craft a value statement that you use regularly in your practice as part of your practice.
right,
I really do. And I think you should put in there everything, not just the, you can talk to me about racial trauma because I've experienced it, but like also like, I speak other languages, like I am a international, a person, a worldly person, I'm not closed
right,
minded, whether you want to talk about ableism or anything like that, or neurodivergence, any of that
right,
stuff. Like I think you should, or gender identity, whatever, like, are people struggling with their sexuality? Maybe you want to put it all in a value statement for yourself to let people know up front, this is who you're going to get
right,
if you work with me, and then you live that out, and that the work will speak for itself, and it will allow for what you want to come to fruition from who you are to come
right,
into existence. Consequently
yeah,
says there are lots of good models on equity statements for social workers.
right. Yeah, so that I'm not yet as a clinician marketing my own practice. So it was just like when she said that, it just like, oh, so what do you think about working with me? So it was not something she'd been working with me a lot, and so yeah, when that came up, it was just like, so are you cool working with me? Like, yeah, so you can't always predict everything that's going to come up, and
You certainly can't.
right, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of rewind back to when you were telling me about your evolution of race consciousness and your experiences. Um, I guess one thing that I want to hear from you is in your self reflection on your experience. For those people who got rated in, one thing that Bruce experienced, that he talked about here is feeling like an alien, feeling like he was completely out of place, and that he had totally different beliefs and ideas, um, because people around him were often saying racist things and showing racist beliefs, and he did not have those thoughts and beliefs and those ideas, and so it made him feel out of place. And he described it as feeling like he was strangled, and that he couldn't speak up about feeling different because who would listen? He was just a little boy.
right,
So that is part of the trauma that you experienced. And I guess um, I kind of want to hear your reflections on how do you think that people can overcome that? Because ultimately, I think that probably that description is the greatest power that keeps racism continuing for generation after generation, is people experiencing that environment and deciding that they don't want to stand alone in that kind of crowd, because that is what catalyzes what we need to happen, is racialized white people breaking through that fear of
Right.
strangulation and standing up for anti-racism. It's a necessary element of curing the problem. And so I just want to hear more about your reflections on dealing with that kind of fear of speaking out. I know you're still dealing with it. And so I just want to hear, you know, how do you
Hmm.
think that people can fight against it?
Um, so with people I find as friends, and when they say things, um, I just speak my mind, and yeah, I say things that are depend on how they're responding. So I'm not powerless now in most cases um, anymore. I'm not like a little boy anymore. I find myself in situations where I'm not in a physically dangerous situation, and so let me give you more examples. So I go out with my girlfriend to the beach, and for me, like I don't even notice like whether we're like the only ones that are interracial or whatever. But she is, and she's aware. Like she has social anxiety, and I don't like being like by myself. But like I'm out there with someone, and I kind of liked her at that time. And so the awareness that she was uncomfortable made me feel kind of like protective and like, okay, so we have to find a little spot that's where there's not many people. Um, but then I'm with someone else, and she just like we're in public and holding hands and like, okay, cool. So you're not like worried about people staring. So yeah, you go to the beach and it's integrated, and so like they're not gonna come attack me, and so I'm not thinking that much about it. But if someone else is worried about it, then I will like um try to be attentive to that. Like if someone has social anxiety, they're afraid that they're staring at us because we're interracial.
So
Then
I'm so
I will.
so I'm not really asking about like you in an interracial situation. I'm
Okay,
really
so
more
all right, let me go to
I'm asking you more about you individually, okay? Like because you were the person in the story
okay,
who was
so
feeling the fear.
right, so I'm not vulnerable now. So let's say one of my friends, my ex-wife, talks to me and she says something uh um prejudice. Um and so I'll just confront her, like depending on what she said. And like so it goes from her screaming at me for like irritating her, like I just want to say this stuff, to eventually getting to a point where um she's like says nothing now. I'll present like, oh, that's racist what you just said. Um and she just has no response at that point. So there's no threat to me. Like, I know mindfulness and like if you want to yell at me, whatever.
Yeah, but I
So
mean like oftentimes, right, as we discussed, there is a threat to you, right? Like in your job when you
yeah,
had that opportunity to speak up, but you felt that same strangulation
right.
because of the consequences, there was a threat to you, and that's why you felt that way. So yeah, in this situation with your ex-wife, you feel like you have the power, you feel like there's no consequences. I get that part, but I
Yeah,
guess what
and
I'm
then
trying
with
to
like,
say is like most of these situations when you're going to speak up and it's going to be consequential is going to
right,
involve either some kind of consequence or
right,
it's going to involve you know, a fear that you're going to have to overcome and or, right? Like so like most people are fighting that fear or are going to have to fight that fear or learn how to fight it in order to actually take action that is anti-racist. So like really what
right.
I'm asking you is like in your experience, right? Because you've experienced that fear. I know you have because you described it. Um,
Yeah,
so I want to know Like, where are you on the progression of like dealing with that fear? And do you feel like you've made strides to overcome it? You've kind of said that you didn't feel it, but you definitely did describe feeling it. So I'm trying to like,
Well, so that job, it was just like, there was so much fear. I was sickened, and I really wasn't there that much after that incident where shadowing that guy who was racist, to figure out like what should I do with this knowledge. So I was only afraid like when they said you can't come back, and I thought that was a reason, and I had to, for a moment there I was, but I really didn't have an opportunity to like even act on it. So the job ended rather abruptly.
yeah,
Um,
that's the second time you said that, and I just feel like I have to call you out on that, bro. You definitely
but
did have an opportunity to act on it if you chose. You chose not to act on it
when? How?
in the moment. There would have been plenty of people who would have said something right then and there, okay? I'm not saying that you should have done that. I'm just saying don't say that you didn't have an opportunity because it's not
Okay,
really the
I was
case.
sick at that point. So
I just think I just want you to think about it realistically, which is that you did make a choice. I feel like you're trying to avoid the idea that you made a choice there, but you did. You chose not to do anything. That was your
I,
choice.
I have the thought that you're devaluing my own emotional experience at that point, and that makes
Why?
me
Why?
emotional because you're saying I had a choice, but then if you're sick to your stomach, if you weren't there feeling that way at that point, and so I was just wanting to get away, go home, and um, so yeah, um, I would never like say to someone else, "Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you like speak up at
Yeah, but
that particular
I
moment?"
didn't say that, right?
It felt no,
Yeah,
I had
but I
that thought.
definitely didn't say that at all.
I
Okay,
know.
so
This is
then
like
so let's not even bring it up and pretend that that did happen.
no,
Let's
no,
think about
no,
what I
no,
did
no,
say.
no, 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 no. Because I've had this discussion with someone too recently on that.
Okay, but we're
We
having a
often do.
discussion now, okay? Like me and
All right,
you.
so I'm going to go on and emphatically say that we as human beings do have a propensity to hear things that are not said. And what I usually say, like I with my ex-wife, like I'll just calmly say, but that's not what I said. She's like so upset and like, I know that's what you heard. I hear that's what you heard. I hear that you're upset. I know that. And I've said something critical to her. And like, and I know, no, I said something actually that was just innocuous feedback. And like, I'll say, I'm sorry you're upset, but that's not what I was saying. So the good response to someone, if I would suggest, is like with empathy and compassion, is say, I'm sorry that you felt that way because that was not my intention. I'm sorry that you heard that, even though I didn't say that. So if you want to win a debate with me, if that's your goal, then you can say to
Are
me,
we debating?
I don't know that if you're saying I'll grant you in a debate situation that you won the debate, you did not actually say something like that, but you're invalidating my emotional reaction.
I don't think I am, and I'm not going to accept that
I'm sorry you
actually.
do.
Well, I'm not going to accept that. So, like, ultimately, brother, I'm not invalidating your emotions because, like, I'm not talking about your emotions. Like, I
But
mean,
you're trying to go back and say to me, basically, I didn't say that. Well, so what? What's your
well, it
point?
mattered because you were going down a pathway based on that, based on me saying that. That's why I stopped you. But like, yeah, I think we need to rewind. Yeah, Cody said, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I also think so. I'm trying to get you to understand that. Well, maybe non-sequently here in the chat has put it the best, which she said, just because it is hard or painful doesn't mean there isn't still a choice. That is what I was getting at.
Right.
And I was not discounting that it was hard or painful for you. In fact, I acknowledged it in the past and more recently. So I'm not sure how I could have invalidated your feelings. If I did that, if that is how you felt, I apologize because that was
Yeah,
not my intention.
but I
However,
would say
like
if
that, I mean,
someone,
is not nowhere remotely close to my intention. Okay.
right, so if I said to someone who's dealing with racialized trauma, get over it, basically, or you had a choice, you could speak up. If you hear some microaggression, like if you confront, like you did have a choice, like, okay, I'll work towards that. But
I'm not even saying that you need to work towards that. I'm not even
yeah,
suggesting that. I'm literally just saying that it's important when you think about these issues that you think about them realistically, like as they actually occurred. And like that includes the feelings that you felt, right? The bad feelings that you felt, the stomach turning and everything. But it also includes a choice, and we have to be cognizant of that. I'm not even saying that you should have made the choice. I'm literally just saying when you're thinking back on it, it's important to
right,
reflect about the fact that you did have a choice and not retell the story as if you didn't. Like that is extremely important in terms of like actually growing in this context. So that's why I stopped you. It wasn't for no other reason. Is because I want you to grow in this context. That was the only reason. So like,
right.
if that made you feel bad, I'm sorry, brother, but like that was
Yeah,
my
it definitely
intention.
felt like, or it seemed like a, because I was learning about the way we use words. It seemed like blaming the victim, like, okay, yeah, I wouldn't have gotten mugged if I didn't get off the bus there in Durham and decide to walk down the
I
street.
would never be
It,
the person who would do that, bro. I'm on video saying racism happens to you. It doesn't really matter what you do or think or say. Racism is a thing that happens to you, and that's what occurred to you. So I would never be the one
but
to.
I did have a choice not to get off the bus and or not to walk here. There are choices where you get hurt, and yeah, I did have a
Listen,
choice, but
you
I
didn't
don't like
you
punish
didn't
myself for not acting on it.
and nor was I, brother. Okay, so then
Okay,
the question becomes like you got to think about why you felt that I was doing that. I feel like that's something that only you can answer. But like that it had nothing to do with me because that would never be me. There's
okay.
video evidence
Well,
that would make
we
it
do
quite
come from a
clear.
different field, definitely. Yeah, I'm very passionate about empathy, and I never invalidate. Like, I just say, "I'm sorry that happened to you," and yeah, or I'm yeah sorry that you had that experience, and then leave it at that, basically.
Well, I mean, we're here having a conversation on race. I'm trying to help you grow in that regard. This is a necessary element of your growth in that regard. So I'm gonna say it. Like I'm so, like I don't regret saying it. So like I mean like I apologize if you felt some kind of way about it, but we could just move on. You know, but
Okay,
like it's still a necessary element of your growth. So if you do want to grow, you're gonna have to face it at some point somehow. What I said. So, um, so Cody says, I think they mean they deal with a lot of anxiety that they need help overcoming in order to choose or be able to do things like that. Well, I mean, I don't think any kind of help is going to help someone overcome that situation. It's kind of a choice that you have to individually make in the situation, is kind of my point. It's like there's really nothing, no aid that is going to help you in that regard, you know, that doesn't come externally by happenstance, probably. So, like, ultimately, that's why it's important to decide what your values are ahead of time so that you're prepared. That is my whole point, is that like dealing with this stuff is hard, as Bruce has like explained and how I have explained many times. It is physically, spiritually, and mentally exhausting, and it has long term impacts on us. And so ultimately, um, if you have to make a choice between, you know, oh, you have to decide, you know, am I always going to protect myself and hold myself and my protection of myself as the highest priority? And that's a perfectly acceptable decision.
all right,
I don't malign anyone for
all right.
making such a decision under the circumstances in which we find ourselves racially. So like that's why I'm saying I would never be the one to judge someone based on not making the choice. That is not what I was getting at. It's not about whether you do or don't make the choice. What you did is in recounting it, you said that you didn't have a choice. And so, like, that is not the reality. That
I
is
did.
not reality.
All right, so all right, I should have said I believed at the time I did not have a choice. At that time, I didn't believe it. And similarly, when I was being abused by my parents in the car over some issue, yeah, I replayed that in over and over and over again in my mind, telling them off, yelling at them, saying, "Stop the freaking car! I'm out! I'm walking back! I don't want to ever see you again! Go to hell!" Like, yeah, I've played over all kinds of scenarios that included using pepper spray even. So yeah, I guess I could have like done all kinds of things. Stop the truck, let me out, I'll walk back to my car. Like, yeah, there were choices.
And that's it. That's all I want you to do is just like
Yeah,
realize that that potential existed. That's literally it. There's nothing else. There's no
yeah, okay, like,
ulterior motives beyond that.
yeah,
Okay?
right, yeah,
All right.
okay. So what does that accomplish other than having me like replay that in nightmares over and over again, like I
I
did
think
with
what it
my,
accomplishes, right? I think if you wanted to accomplish something, I think that what it can accomplish is giving you an opportunity to realize that the next time something happens, right, you may want to
right,
be better prepared, right? You may want to be better prepared to already decide, like, I already know what I'll do in these types of situations. That's why I said, like, you can do that ahead of time. And
right,
it's very valuable because when you get into the situation, what you'll realize is that the initial fears and anxieties that you felt and the stomach churning that you felt
yeah,
at that time, it'll be much less. And then it'll allow your mind to actually decide in the moment, okay, this is what my values are. This is what I thought. In this moment, I have an opportunity. I even know some things that I can do. But you didn't have the room, you didn't have the space for that because
right,
the stomach churning was like that you hadn't answered that question ahead of time. You didn't have time to both answer that question and decide what to do. So I'm
yeah,
just trying to give you an opportunity to learn how to give yourself that space.
yeah, okay. So a good example is like the way I talked about, really confronting my parents and doing something really angry and impulsive and just,
The dinner
yeah,
table scenario, eh?
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
telling them like when they use the N word, it's fuck, 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 and and said that's just a word. So I was at that point at a place for like thinking, you are just the biggest son of a bitches of narcissistic parents, and I don't really care about. I'm just like, I'm not going to put up with your shit anymore. And so I was in a more powerful position. Like I could have gotten out and said, Lynn, we're going back, getting in the car, we're leaving. If they had a problem with that, then I went through a period where for a long, long time, where I was back to being shy again. And so you're right, change is possible. You can become very ballsy and go to people and say, stop, let me out here. What you said is just disgusting and offensive to me.
But there's
And I did
also
it.
there's an ocean between that and doing nothing, bro. There is an
Yeah,
ocean of possibilities between doing nothing and fuck fuck fuck. Okay? There is
yeah,
so much between that. That's what I want you to realize is that like you don't necessarily have to work on being less shy. You don't necessarily have to change that much. You know,
right,
like even what you did, necessarily you don't have to change much about what you did. Like
right. But
you
you did prove to me that it is possible to feel or to become more empowered. And I,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
there is a choice, but yeah, I somehow, for whatever reason, I didn't believe there was, but I've seen from my own experience that there are choices. And you can,
Yes, sir. And if that's what
yeah,
comes out of this conversation, if that's one thing that comes out of this conversation, I think that was worth it, brother. To me, that's a
yeah,
win.
yeah. But I certainly do it with my friends. Like, I'm going at it with my friend Suzanne all the time, like pointing that out, like seeing how far until I won't, she's not going to talk to me anymore. Like, I don't know, like sometimes she stops calling tonight. As I said a whole bunch of stuff, and she actually called. So it's like, yeah, whatever. Like if she stops calling, like, okay, whatever. That's your issue, but I'm not going to stop calling out, you know, your your problems. Like I do it gently because you're not really a bad person, but um, yeah, I know that you're gonna feel defensive. I asked, well, why do people like you feel defensive? You know, what when I make these statements, why are you being defensive? You know, I don't understand. But some people, yeah,
Yeah, man. I mean, we can't control how other people react to these things, especially when you're helping people like work on themselves. Like, people in the chat are kind of talking about it, and I feel it, and I felt it with you before. Like when I talked to you about using racialized, like you accepted what I said. You listened, and
yeah,
and and I feel like here again, you've shown that you have the capacity to learn and grow, and like and from what others say, and like people in the chat are recognizing that, and that alone is just like such a powerful tool in your arsenal. You're gonna be just fine. I have no fears about you, brother. Like as long as you continue down the path that you've set
yeah.
yourself
To
on.
be honest, I'm trying to get over a relationship that was invalidating in times and really painful. I need to get some therapy for that. And I guess somehow there was a parallel between something you were saying and that experience. And it just felt like you're trying so hard to say, that's not what I said. And it's like, okay, but
Yeah, sorry I was a little bit aggressive in that moment. It's only because like that was a critical misunderstanding. Like it needed to be cleared up right away. That's why I had to like I was like, we can't follow this path all the way down. Like normally if someone mishears me or something like and it doesn't really matter that much that they misheard me, I'll just let it go on. But like in that regard, it was so critical that I felt I had to stop. So that's the reason why I kind of interrupted you like that. But like, no, it wasn't because I was trying to be critical of your ability to like hear me or anything like that. It's because like it was just critical to making sure that I understand that I was communicating to you properly. That really I just wanted to empower you, like you said. Like that's what I was trying to say is that like if you delete that moment, then you're losing
yeah,
an opportunity for empowerment. That's all.
yeah.
Well, listen, we got about 5 minutes left. Is there anything else you'd like to go over while we have this last 5 minutes, or any
Um,
last words you want to say to the audience as a sign off, perhaps?
yeah, I don't know. It took a lot of courage for me. It was interesting for me to actually speak up for myself, actually, which is to just say how I felt was like that was empowering because like I haven't like felt that courage to do that. And yeah, just to say like this is how I'm thinking and that causes me to feel these negative feelings. Um and to be assertive about that. And yeah, I didn't it was just like spontaneous and so that was like really empowering, I guess, for me to find that in me to speak up and um just say how I was feeling. So, yeah.
Well, I'm
So,
glad I could create that opportunity for you to do that, brother. All right. So thanks for coming and thanks for asking your questions and sharing your story with us. Really appreciate you making yourself vulnerable in that way. And yeah, you're welcome anytime. I hope to see you at future events. We're still going to get together live as well.